In 2014, Barcelona were at a crossroads. The club that had reached unprecedented heights under Pep Guardiola was now reeling from turbulence on and off the pitch. They bid farewell to beloved figures, experienced a merry-go-round of shameless individuals in the presidency, players were embroiled in alleged fraud, transfer bans were looming over signing minors, and, above all that, their closest rivals smelt blood and were reaching the highest of heights of the game in their absence. In short, Barca's empire looked shaky. The club's identity and confidence were under siege. Luckily for them, this is a club that always seems to find ways to claw themselves back to the top regardless of circumstance. Nowhere was this more evident than under Luis Enrique. It's a story of domination. It's a story of a trio that will arguably never be topped. However, ironically, it's a story of how a combination of elite talent can paper over the cracks of a truly broken system. Today, we look at the tale of Luis Enrique's Barcelona, an imperfect picture of perfection. By 2011, the squad that Barcelona had was widely considered to be the greatest team to ever play in the modern era. They seemed to have no major weaknesses and could do pretty much no wrong. Mourinho's Madrid, however, showed that they, in fact, could be beaten and frustrated to no end. And with his departure in the 11-12 season, amid burnout and internal politics with the board, Guardiola disagreed with the overall philosophies of the higher-ups, and this era's golden glow gave way to uncertainty. Until Tito Vilanova, Guardiola's assistant and yet another academy product, took over and led the club to their best ever season in the league, equaling the overall points tally set by Real Madrid only 1 year prior, 100 points. It was a picture of domination. Watching Barcelona and a Lionel Messi in his prime, or at least one of his primes, this was the goal-scoring one, 73 goals in 11-12 and 60 in 12-13, was incredible. Sadly, this is where tragedy struck. Behind the triumph was a private struggle. Tito Vilanova had been diagnosed with throat cancer as early as 2011. In December of 2012, during his first season in charge, news broke that he required surgery and intensive treatment, often flying between Barcelona and New York for treatment, while still trying to manage the team. His resilience inspired both players and fans, but by July 2013, doctors advised him that the intensity of this treatment was far too great to simultaneously coach at the level required. So he had to step down in the midst of Barcelona's greatest league campaign of all time. And this is where things started to get quite messy in a way that I don't think a lot of people expected. Pep Guardiola had taken a sabbatical from coaching to spend his days in New York in an attempt to learn English, coincidentally the same city that Vilanova was receiving treatment. By the end of his sabbatical, funnily enough, it wasn't English that Guardiola ended up learning, but rather German, as he decided to take on the job as the Bayern Munich head coach just prior to the 13-14 campaign. Coincidentally, Bayern Munich was set to play Barcelona in a preseason friendly just before that year. Now, all of that seemed normal enough. However, 1 week before said friendly, it came out through Barcelona officials that Guardiola had failed to show support for Vilanova despite them both being in the same city for a prolonged period. There seemed to be no love lost between the former manager and the club. Guardiola rebutted to these allegations. Quote, "I will never forget that they used Tito's illness to cause me damage because it's a lie that I never saw him in New York. I saw him once, and the reason I didn't see him more often was because it wasn't possible. And that wasn't my fault." End quote. Days later, Vilanova came out with a comment of his own. Quote, "People aren't interested in personal matters, but Pep got it wrong, and I'm surprised by his comments. No one on the board used my illness to attack him. The club tried to help me as much as possible. He visited me once in New York when I just arrived, but during my recovery from the operation, I was there for 2 months, and I didn't see him. He's my friend, and I needed him, but he wasn't there for me. I would have done things differently. I won't say anything else about this." End quote. While all of this was happening, strangely enough, there did seem to be several allegations thrown towards Guardiola and his character by all of the Barcelona mouthpieces. First, Blaugrana lost Thiago, a promising young midfielder, to Guardiola and Bayern. Barcelona were also on the verge of signing Neymar from Santos, something that Pep assisted in setting up while being a Barca coach. But Pep had reportedly still been in contact with Neymar's father and the president of Santos when he had already been confirmed as Bayern coach. Naturally, another rumor stated that he believed Vilanova could not manage Messi and Neymar together and was making an attempt to snipe the deal. Guardiola did admit to meeting Neymar's father in New York just before joining Bayern to understand what the situation was, but he vehemently denied ever bringing up Vilanova in these discussions or trying to sabotage the deal. As I said, all of this was very messy, and there are still many questions unanswered. On the football front, for players, this period became more than a pursuit of trophies. It was about honoring their coach, and sadly, less than a year later, in April of 2014, Tito Vilanova passed on at just 45 years of age. The significance of this period in Barcelona's history can't be overstated. Regardless of who was in the right and what was said behind closed doors, it was clear that Barcelona as a club were moving in a strange direction. I skipped over this part, but a main indicator of this was Sandro Rosell being elected into the presidency in 2011, following on from Joan Laporta. Rosell, an entrepreneur, and Guardiola never saw eye to eye, and there are some interesting theories behind this. One suggests that Guardiola represented the Barcelona of old, Cruyffian, football first, nothing else mattered. Rosell and his crew, on the other hand, represented a new, business-first approach, as indicated by the club acquiring their first ever shirt sponsors in 2011, despite only ever endorsing charities on their t-shirts prior to this. Barcelona is a club deeply proud of their Catalan identity, and Rosell's team sought to extend their influence and fan base across the globe, to the dismay of many who believe the club was losing its essence. It has long been proven that Barcelona execs are not afraid to use intermediaries to launch media campaigns against their own players and legends. These attacks, or rather alleged attacks against Guardiola, are said to be no different, with the aim being to diminish his influence despite the fact that he was no longer employed by the club. Like I said, we don't know who was in the right or who was in the wrong, especially when it came to Vilanova and his illness, but it seemed extremely unnecessary for this sensitive topic to play out in the public eye in the way that it did. All of it came across as extremely politically charged, and it was about to get even worse. Gerardo Martino, an Argentine coach untested in European football, was parachuted into one of Europe's top jobs in 2014. He started well enough, but ultimately looked out of his depth. Barcelona simply could not handle Diego Simeone's Atletico Madrid, playing them a total of 6 times and failing to register even one win, apart from the Supercopa de España tie, which they won on away goals despite never actually winning any of the games in regular time. They also lost the league title to Atletico with a draw against them on the final day of the year. They were also knocked out of the Champions League by Atletico in the quarterfinals and had to watch as the Madrid teams played the first ever same city Champions League final. They lost the Copa del Rey final to Real Madrid, where Gareth Bale ended Marc Bartra's career. Real Madrid also won their 10th UCL title, making it La Decima. Martino resigned immediately, and by summer 2014, trust in the board was tumbling even further. We'll touch on it later, but La Masia was dying a slow death as fewer and fewer graduates were being promoted and pushed. And La Masia is, of course, the crown jewel of this club. It's the reason why they've been able to be so competitive throughout the years, despite all of their financial struggles since the very beginning of their existence. On the other hand, things were looking on the up because Neymar, a young Brazilian wonder kid drawing Pele comparisons, was signed a year prior in 2013. He was special. However, that signing was immediately called into question because Barca claimed that Neymar's transfer fee was 57 million euros, only for investigations to reveal the cost was closer to 90 million euros and upwards, with secret payments going to his father, Neymar Sr.'s company. A former Santos president, Luis Alvaro, also once claimed that Barcelona included several first-class tickets around the world and an orgy in London for Neymar Sr., which is... it's a bit odd. But I guess when your son is Neymar, you can pretty much ask for whatever you want. In the wake of all of this, President Rosal stepped down, but the man was never shy of the spotlight because as the years went on, he would continually make the news for tax fraud, money laundering, forgery, several forms of corruption, and also be jailed for almost 2 years in 2017. In his place, his vice president, Josep Maria Bartomeu, took over in 2014. And because there is never a boring day in Barcelona, to make matters worse, as the club's debt levels were spiraling, they were handed a 14-month transfer ban for registering 10 players under the age of 18 between 2009 and 2013. All of those players subsequently had to leave the club, one of which was Andre Onana. So, at least we know for a fact that things could have gotten worse. Regardless, when it rains, it pours. Barcelona were in crisis. They needed something different to reignite the flame, so they hired a former Barcelona player, yet again, Luis Enrique. Hold on though, this man wasn't your typical former Barcelona type, never an academy player and also a man that moved straight from Real Madrid to Barcelona before eventually becoming the captain of the club. He was a unique profile. He has an aggression, a hyper-competitiveness, and intensity. Following his retirement from football, where most ex-players fall into comfort and ease, he went the opposite route. Ironmans, marathons, surfing contests, he's a true athlete and competitive. And having been that combative, fiery type as a player, he translated that intensity and directness to his coaching philosophies. He wasn't a disciple of total football in the way Guardiola or his predecessors were. This was no tiki-taka. Luis Enrique was and still is a quintessential counter-attacking coach. Quick transitions, long diagonals, width, and more. His coaching journey first took him, as he called it, home. In 2008, he took over the Barcelona B side when Guardiola was promoted to the first team. After gaining promotion to the Segunda division for the first time in 11 years, he sought a different challenge, moving to Roma in 2011. When that didn't work out, he hopped over to Celta Vigo in 2013. Eventually, all roads, however, led back to Barcelona. By 2014, Barca sporting director Andoni Zubizarreta had seen enough to make Enrique his top choice for the senior job. With Zubizarreta's backing and Pep's public endorsement, Luis Enrique took the helm in May 2014, 18 years after he had first signed as a Barcelona player. Being a coach is more than putting together a lineup. It's managing a group, players' personalities, motivating them. We will attack and play the attractive football that millions of people around the world like to see. Interestingly, Enrique's appointment was quite a masterstroke. His time with the club as a player coincided with an era of both constant crisis and revival. Up and down. Up and down. Managers came and left. Players did the same. Add in the fact that he didn't necessarily have Barca DNA, but was still deeply understanding of what the club meant to the city and the people. This gave him a flexible outlook. An outlook that meant that he was well equipped to tackle what was to come. Luis Enrique's tenure began with a sense of cautious optimism. Just before the transfer ban kicked in, Barca were able to splash 160 million euros on fresh faces, including Ivan Rakitic, Marc-Andre ter Stegen, Claudio Bravo, Jeremy Mathieu, Thomas Vermaelen, and of course, Luis Suárez. Luis Suárez was coming off, in my humble opinion, and I will die on this hill, the greatest individual season in Premier League history. He was an animal. There's just no other way to describe him. Attack, defense, goals, assists, interceptions, last-ditch tackles, transitions, overlapping, underlapping, drifting in and out, playing on both flanks, in the middle and deep. I've personally never seen anything like it. Neither had Norwich, to be fair. He scored 31 goals and made 13 assists in his final year at Anfield and did it in only 33 games while coming agonizingly close to dragging an otherwise mediocre Liverpool to a Premier League trophy. From that alone, you would think at minimum a top 10 Ballon d'Or finish would be in order. You would think that until you remember that fair play and sportsmanship is a criteria. Sadly, I described Luis Suárez as an animal for a reason, because like many wild animals, he had a taste for human flesh. He missed those 5 league games because he had racially abused Patrice Evra in a match versus Manchester United the previous year. He missed the first 8 games the very next season, his first with Barcelona, because he decided to, not for the first time, nor the second time, but for the 3rd time in his professional career, bite an opposing defender. His target was Chiellini in the 2014 World Cup. Why has he done that? In any case, the early days of the Luis Enrique era were relatively slow to start. The squad he had at his disposal was strong. Bravo, Piqué, Alba, Busquets, Dani Alves, Messi, Neymar, Suarez, Pedro, Iniesta, Xavi, Mascherano, Rakitic, and more. However, squad rotation was rampant as the club failed to get into a rhythm. This apparently did not sit well with many in the squad. Regardless, it was a winning start, and after 8 games, Barca were in pole position and looking good. But then came a trip to the Bernabeu on the 25th of October, 2014. An early goal from Neymar made the Blaugrana faithful stand up, but 3 in reply by Madrid made them sit back down and sent the club into crisis. They lost the next game to Celta Vigo, having wasted countless opportunities. After these results, the club was left in 4th place. And on top of all of this, there was even more bad news. Rumors of a philosophical rift slowly growing between the manager and his biggest star. The storm hit in January 2015, and it hit hard. On January 4, the first match of the year, Barcelona traveled to Real Sociedad, a notoriously tricky away fixture for them. 1-0 loss. Who was responsible for all of this?
I'm sorry to say again, it's Moise.
David Moyes, shamed from his time at Manchester United and in a redemption tour as Sociedad manager, downed the mighty Barca. But things were certainly not all well in the Barca camp. Earlier in the week, Messi had requested to return to training later than the rest of the squad after the holiday break. Luis Enrique had taken notice of this and apparently was displeased. Another story details that during a practice match during a training session just after this holiday break, Enrique was acting as the referee and refused to call what was apparently a blatant foul on Lionel Messi, which led to the two clashing. The quarrel spilled over into the dressing room and beyond, to the point where that weekend, up against Sociedad, the coach, in a shocking turn of events, decided to bench Messi and Neymar, and the team were downed by 1-0. The next morning, Messi did not show up to an open training session. Officially, the club claimed he had gastroenteritis. I mean, Buddy was clearly sick to his stomach, but I highly doubt it was food poisoning. Naturally, the vultures in the press were out for blood, and Messi was the only topic of discussion for the next few pressers. Enrique's response was quite telling of the overall environment he was working in. Quote, "There have been so many stories, and I am not going to confirm or deny any of them. There are some rules that everyone must comply with. That is one of my principles." End quote. The chaos did not stop there. Within 24 hours of the loss, President Bartomeu fired Andoni Zubizarreta. If you recall, he was the sporting director and Enrique's main guy in the upper management. Club legend Carles Puyol, Zubizarreta's assistant, resigned in solidarity hours after that. Bartomeu knew his position was in jeopardy, so, scrambling to stabilize the institution, announced the club would hold new presidential elections at season's end in 2015, bringing forward a vote not due until 2026. The purpose of this officially was to, quote, reduce the tension, but to many it seemed like a desperate attempt to consolidate power while he still had many of the club's top brass in his favor, decreasing the risk of further collapse that would leave him more or less without a chance of re-election a year later if the club were in a much worse position. Chaos was the word of the day. Luis Enrique's first season at Barcelona is a perfect illustration of the pressures and expectations that come with this club. By the Sociedad loss, Barcelona were in 2nd place, only 4 behind Real Madrid. However, the politics behind closed door caused calamity. A poll done at the time claimed that 68% of Barcelona fans were in favor of shifting Luis Enrique on. His playstyle, as I've already mentioned, was a departure from what the faithful were used to, and we all know that most people have a natural aversion to change of any kind. However, the manager was self-aware. He wasn't about to change his philosophy, and on the day of arguably the biggest game of the year, reigning champions Atletico Madrid at the Camp Nou, 1 week after the Sociedad game, he acknowledged that he only had one option. Victories are the only thing that can calm this wave. Later that same night, Barcelona beat Atletico 3-1 in the first game that all three of Messi, Suarez, and Neymar scored. It's quite symbolic. And this was the same Atletico, if you recall, that Barcelona played 6 times in the previous campaign, failing to register a single victory. After the game, the manager was asked if the crisis was averted. No. Next time we lose, it will be back. We all knew what he was saying was true, so it's a good thing that they barely lost for the remainder of the year. Something changed. Everything just seemed to click. The starting 11 was far more consistent. The goals were flowing. The fabled MSN, Messi, Suarez, Neymar, came alive. Messi on the right, Neymar on the left, Suarez the tip of the spear. They were unpredictable. They were fluid. They were, simply put, the best attacking trio of all time. In the 14-15 season, they combined for 122 goals. 122 between 3 people. It's nuts. 58 for Messi, 39 for Suarez, and 25 for Neymar. And remember, Suarez missed the first 4 months of the year in all competitions because of his vampire activity. We all know this was a real restriction because with a full season to work with, he showed us all what he could really do the very next year. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The turnaround was almost instantaneous. New man Ivan Rakitic was a revelation, not as elegant a playmaker as Xavi, but more physical and dynamic. Certainly a better fit for this new direct strategy. The team's pressing game was also completely revamped. The result was that from that loss at Sociedad in early January through to the end of the 14-15 season, Barcelona played 34 games and won 30 of them. They stormed towards every title on offer. La Liga was wrapped up a game in advance. The Copa del Rey was secured and featured one of Messi's greatest goals of all time. He starts on the halfway line and beats virtually the entire Athletic Club defense, calm as you like, Puskas. In the Champions League, Barca downed Manchester City, the reigning English champions, Paris Saint-Germain, the reigning French champions, and Bayern Munich, the reigning German champions. Reminder, this was Pep Guardiola's Bayern Munich. It didn't matter because Messi delivered a masterpiece at the Camp Nou, sending Jerome Boateng to the shadow realm. He was never seen or heard from again. And then, in the final, they met the Italian champions, Juventus. There was only ever going to be one winner in this. From being on the brink of collapse, doubted by everyone, even those in his own team, Luis Enrique had completed a miraculous feat. Treble winner, only months after being odds-on for the sack. As a reward, Enrique earned a contract extension, and in the glow of the treble, Bartomeu rode the success of this impressive gamble and won re-election as president in July 2015. Barcelona is a club of cycles, perhaps the best example of one in European football. But in this moment, it was happy days, the happiest of days. All was right in the Culé universe. The 2015-16 season began as the last one had ended. The only major incoming player was Arda Turan, a Turkish midfielder from Atletico Madrid, but because of their transfer ban, he was not able to register until January 2016. Apart from that, the boys were just having fun, scoring goals, extending their winning streak. By late 2015, the streak had been extended to 39 games in all competitions. Barca swept the FIFA Club World Cup, and by the turn of the year, they were favorites for everything yet again. Luis Suarez, now fully integrated and in peak form, was scoring at an ungodly pace, hitting 59 in all competitions, 40 in the league. Take a look at this right here. Notice the odd one out? In the 9 years of Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi's tyranny of Spain, the only other person to win a top scorer award in La Liga was the Uruguayan Luis Suarez. It wasn't just that, he topped the assists list too, although he had to share that accolade with Messi himself. We talk about Ronaldo and Messi coming from outer space quite frequently. If we're being fair, Suarez was once an alien himself. If it hadn't been a Euro year, Copa America year, and Olympics year, with Suarez being injured and Uruguay subsequently performing poorly, perhaps he would have seriously been in for more individual glory. Ronaldo, Messi, Neymar, and Antoine Griezmann all stood in his way for top honors, and with Ronaldo winning the 2016 Euros, Griezmann finishing as Euro runner-up, Messi finishing as Copa America runner-up, and Neymar winning Olympic gold, Luis Suarez basically stood no chance. MSN scored 131 goals this season, a record that remains the highest tally for any attacking trio in the history of top-level European football. 59 for Suarez, 41 for Messi, 31 for Neymar. It's just simply unreal. There were some bumps in the road for Barca this season. A loss to Real Madrid towards the end not only ended a long winning streak, but also triggered a 3 losses in a row chain reaction. It took the league to the final day of the year where only 1 point ended up making the difference. They recovered and won both La Liga and the Copa del Rey. However, because history has a funny way of repeating itself, Barca were knocked out of the UCL by Atletico again in the quarterfinals, and again acted as a stepping stone towards an all-Madrid final. No matter, because Barca was still at the top of the hill in Spain. But, as you've probably noticed, that is never enough for this organization. Within the club and fan base, some started to wonder if their identity was still intact. By the end of the 15-16 year, the core of the squad was getting up there in age. Xavi had just left the club, Iniesta was 32, Dani Alves was 33, Mascherano was 32, Suarez, Messi, Piqué, 30. As for the MSN, between them, they were substituted only 4 times all league season. They were remarkably durable, yes, but the tank was close to empty. Once again, politics and mismanagement were about to reveal the dark side of Blaugrana. Zooming out of the glow of the 2015 treble, it's easy to think that this club was a marvel of organization, strategy, and grit. And while the latter may be true, the former two were nowhere near the truth. The actual truth is that Luis Enrique's tactical prowess, backed by generational players, papered over the cracks of what we all know now was pure negligence by those in charge. President Bartomeu's board, having won re-election, felt they were on the right track and doubled down on a strategy that emphasized global marketing, big sponsorships, and flashy signings. Remember, he was Sandro Rosel's vice president. After all, La Masia had been neglected, with no major talents being bled in the first team for what seemed like years. All the youth that showed promise were either never given a chance or left of their own volition. Instead, Bartomeu and his board spent 123 million euros on a whole gang of players, just about all of whom never made any sort of impact. Paco Alcácer for 32 million, Andre Gomez for 35 million, Jasper Cillessen for 15, Lucas Digne for 20, all while losing academy graduates like Munir Al-Haddadi, Mark Bartra, Sandro, and Martin Montoya. Now, don't get me wrong, you can say that none of these guys, bar maybe Munir and I guess Bartra, who was in the team for a bit, had the potential to develop to be good enough to play for Barcelona and be one of the best. But that's precisely the problem, isn't it? Something wasn't working anymore. In yet another close year, Barcelona lost out in the 16-17 season to Real Madrid in the league. This was a blow, and despite pulling off one of the most iconic comebacks in Champions League history against PSG, they again were knocked out in the quarterfinals. In fact, in that Champions League campaign, the togetherness of the squad, especially away from home, was a real cause for concern. In that year's knockouts, there were 0 goals for, 7 goals against on aggregate away from home. It was indicative of a shift. The relentless grind of the Barca job was taking a toll on the Asturian coach. His staff noticed that he was more short-tempered, less jovial as the months wore on. In early March, just after a 6-1 rout of Sporting Gijón in the league, he had made a bombshell announcement in the press. He would step down at the end of the season. Quote, "I need to rest." It was the same Luis Enrique who had once run marathons for fun. Now, he was plainly just running on empty, too tired to deal with what was going on. After 3 seasons in the hottest of hot seats, no one blamed him for stepping away. He would depart having won 8 of a possible 10 major domestic and European trophies, and in case you need someone to tell you what that means, it means he was an actual wizard. But beyond the silverware, Enrique was leaving behind a team at a crossroads. Once again, immensely talented, yet fractured in so many ways. By pure results, Luis Enrique's era was a golden chapter in Barcelona's history. He restored the club to the summit of Europe, kept their dominance intact in Spain, and oversaw some of the most breathtaking attacking football the Camp Nou has ever seen. Yet, the legacy of Luis Enrique's Barcelona is a nuanced one. The incredible football on the pitch left many distracted from the issues on a management level. As I already said, spending by the board was rampant as dud after dud entered the club. With Messi aging and Neymar looking like the prince that was promised, it seemed as though he was be the one that would lead Barcelona into the future, which was until he decided to leave immediately after the Enrique era for PSG for a mind-boggling 222 million euros. This was a major blow and had major ripple effects throughout the entire football world. It triggered a chain of events that led to Barcelona buying Coutinho from Liverpool, Ousmane Dembele from Borussia Dortmund. Liverpool then used the unlimited Coutinho money to complete their squad and become giants once again. I believe that Coutinho money is still going very strong. Like his predecessor, Bartomeu continued to make the news for all the wrong reasons as the years ticked on. More corruption cases, more negligence, more arrests, more scrutiny. He even went as far as to hire a shadow agency to disseminate positive PR about himself to improve his image, while launching smear campaigns against those in the Barcelona community that opposed him, including some of the active and former players. It was really some nasty stuff. The decisions made by this board left a lasting mark on the club, one that arguably still hasn't been resolved almost a decade later. But back to Luis Enrique's Barcelona. This team was a marvel to watch when they were at their full flight. They had amazing players in every single position. They could do everything and do it in style. It is unfortunate that everything going on in and around Barcelona at the time painted such a confusing and chaotic picture. But to us as spectators, what we have are memories that will last a lifetime. A truly fearless manager and entertainment value that I don't think we'll get anytime soon. Luis Enrique's Barcelona, ladies and gentlemen, an imperfect picture of perfection.